Okay, you're negating parliamentary democracy, and yet on the other hand, the country is thirsting for a tough anti-corruption law, with lots of provocative comments there from Abhishek Manu Singh. Let's take a short break and come back and in fact look at that anti-corruption movement on the Jan Lokpal bill and get comments in from Kiran Bedi. You're watching State of the Nation, and we are bringing you our exclusive CNN IBN TV 18, the Hindu poll in Independence Day week on the performance of this government. The anti-corruption movement has got the government on the back foot. Let's take a look at our findings now. Who is more known to the people, Baba Ramdev or Anna Hazare? This is a very interesting finding here. While 60% people had heard Baba Ramdev's name, 53% actually know about Baba Ramdev and not just his name. 45% respondents said they had heard of Anna Hazare. 38% people actually knew about Anna Hazare's movement. So many more people actually know about Baba Ramdev than they know about Anna Hazare. When asked about Baba Ramdev's political foray, 38% say Baba Ramdev should stick to yoga and not meddle in politics. 22% saying his entry into politics perfectly acceptable, but 41% people say the government's midnight action against Ramdev was unjustified. Who is more trustworthy, Baba Ramdev or Anna Hazare? Anna Hazare is seen as much more credible. 26% people said Anna Hazare is more trustworthy. 14% people feel that Baba Ramdev is more trustworthy. 10% respondents both are equally trustworthy. 6% said none can be trusted. What is the people's opinion about the Lokpal bill? Do people prefer Jan Lokpal version or government's Lokpal draft? 25% said Anna's Lokpal draft much better than government draft. 7% say government's version is better. 5% say there is not much to choose between the two. But this is a very important finding. 63% have either not heard about the two Lokpal drafts or they have no opinion about the drafts at all. Now, this is a reality check for us, Yogen, because as you have written again in your analytical article, only 1/3 of Indians have heard about the Lokpal bills, and only 1/4 of them have any idea what the bill is about. So we're looking not at a Jayaprakash Narayan movement of Sampurna Kranti, we're looking at a movement perhaps located very much in the urban educated class.
It's not only urban educated, it's wider, but the whole point of doing a national survey like this is to go to the interiors of Karnataka and ask a woman who's 70-year-old, have you heard about Lokpal bill? And then you get to see the reality. You see, the fact is that for things of this kind, 3/4 of India has no sense of what this whole dispute is all about. Yes, they've heard about Anna Hazare's name. Yes, they've heard about Baba Ramdev. And these are important, and figures of 40–50% are very big figures. But let's not forget, in all this media gaze and publicity and our sort of own bubble that we all create in studios like this.
All of us living in our chattering journalistic bubble.
I mean, these bubbles, especially in studios like this, that we create, that there's a world outside it. And most people don't know. On the other hand, we also need to remember that of those who have heard about it, the opinion is completely against the government.
And it's not just the BJP voters. It's not just the BJP voters who are anti-government on corruption. It's cutting across voting communities.
That's one thing we wanted to check, whether Baba Ramdev's support or Anna Hazare's support is sort of driven by BJP or something of that sort. That's not the case.
That's not the case.
Support across the parties is not very different.
Let's get Kiran Bedi in on this. Kiran Bedi, I want you to respond to two things. First of all, to Abhishek Manu Singh's point that this government has done much more for the Lokpal than any other government before it. Second of all, the fact that a majority of Indians don't even know about the Lokpal bill or Jan Lokpal bill. The fact is, when you say you're the voice of the people don't know exactly what your cause is. And maybe if they knew what your cause is, they wouldn't give you that kind of wholehearted support. Is that a worry for you?
Let me answer the first question. How much more has the government done? And I have this United Nations Convention before me, and it is this Lokpal is actually in continuation of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. And look, having signed the convention, how they have totally destroyed, truncated and fractured the definition of public official. I want to tell you, give me a moment. It says, the United Nations Convention says that a public official shall mean any person holding a legislative, executive, administrative or judicial office of a state party, whether appointed or elected, whether permanent or temporary, whether paid or unpaid, irrespective of that person's seniority, any other person who performs a public function, including for a public agency or public enterprise, or provides a public service as defined in the domestic law. My friends, look at their definition. It is most fractured under Section 17. It excludes more than it includes. In fact, even your Corruption Act is more comprehensive than your Lokpal bill. Look, I looked at the Domestic Violence Act. Any act which is based on the United Nations Convention, Sagarika, please make a note. It begins with the UN Convention. I have the act with me, the Domestic Violence Act. It begins with the United Nations Convention. Can you believe it? Our Lokpal bill doesn't even mention.
I have only one comment.
Let me complete.
Let me bring you to the second question.
Let me complete. No. Let me complete. That our Lokpal doesn't even mention United Nations Convention. It's most unheard of. I'm amazed. How could they ignore the United Nations Convention?
No, but let me bring you to the second question. You made that point about the shortcomings in the government draft, but respond to that. The majority of Indians don't know about your bill. They don't know about the Jan Lokpal bill or the government's Lokpal bill. So when you say you're the voice, don't you think a mass education program is called for before you claim to be the voice of the people?
Of course, yes. Let me explain. But let me complete my first, because you gave a lot of time to Mr. Singhvi. Why they've excluded the United Nations Convention mention. Everything which comes from the UN Convention is the beginning of the draft. Why have they? Because if they mention, they have to enlarge the scope. They have to enlarge the scope. My second answer is, then listen, this is a developing story. This is a developing movement. And it does take its time.
Okay, Mr. Hari Salve wants to come in.
But it's come a long way.
If this is the level of debate you are going to have on drafting of laws, it only proves the point that civil society should lead movements and leave drafting of laws to people who are far more adept at the subject. But let me tell you something, Sagarika, which worries me. Lokpal bill is a must. You must have a Lokpal. There is no question about it. Should the Prime Minister be left out of it? The jury is still out on the question. Speaking for myself, I have not heard very convincing arguments about this deferment, etc. These don't cut eyes, but maybe I am wrong. The point is, judiciary has to be left out of it. Now, unfortunately, the intransigence of those who are pushing the Lokpal bill appears to be far more this time than the intransigence of the politicians. The politicians are at least willing to listen. Those who push the Lokpal bill, if you disagree with them, they say you're a jokepal. Now, this is not the way to conduct a civil debate. The third thing is, and this is important, the Lokpal bill is a small solution to a huge problem.
Exactly.
The Lokpal is to police.
Nobody denies that.
Has anybody even spoken of the basic causes in India? Discretionary powers of all natural resources must be stripped.
Right.
We need transparency, and then we need a Lokpal.
Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, you're nodding your head there. Much more systemic change needed, a complete overhaul of the court and judicial and police process surely is needed, discretionary power of politician and bureaucrat, systemic changes. Are we placing too much faith in the Lokpal?
No. See, Sagarika, I think I need to respond to one point that Yogendra mentioned about not too many people understanding the Lokpal bill. You see, 60–70% of the country today realizes there is corruption. But they haven't really necessarily made the connection between corruption and the solution to corruption being Lokpal. And that will take time. And I think Ms. Bedi said today, just now, that this is a process that will take time. So I don't think you should read too much into the fact that people haven't jumped out at the pollster and said, yes, we love Lokpal or we don't love Lokpal. So leave that as it may to the side. The fact is today, corruption is a consequence of significantly administrative discretion being misused by bureaucrats and politicians. The Lokpal is a deterrent to it, but it does not prevent people from using it who don't fear the law.
That's the whole
and
problem.
therefore, the entire governance system has to be relooked at from a point of view of removing administrative discretions. And I've seen now what the government is doing by way of removing administrative discretions, removing from the urban development minister the discretion to allot an out-of-turn home does not prevent corruption in the urban development ministry. So we have to squarely address the issue of administrative discretion. We have to tackle that
And you
in a
don't
manner
believe
where
that
there is no
Lokpal can do
administrative
that.
discretion.
You don't believe that a Lokpal can do that. You don't believe that setting up simply an ombudsman at the top with huge powers and police powers can do that.
No, look, we have a Lokayukta in Karnataka that hasn't stopped illegal mining.
Right.
So,
Ms. Bedi, respond
it will
to
only
that.
stop illegal mining if there is a prosecution that the Lokayukta starts.
That's a very good point.
The mining laws need to be fixed.
The mining laws...
The mining laws, the way the mines are given.
The way the mines are
Complete abuse
given...
of discretion.
So it's discretionary
Believe me,
power.
wherever there is mining, there is dirt.
Okay, we're coming now to discretionary power of the politician, which is leading to corruption. Respond to that, Ms. Kiran Bedi, and also respond to Mr. Harish Salve's charge that you cannot have a Lokpal by driving a coach and horses through the Constitution of India. You can't say that the Prime Minister will be under it, the judiciary will be under it, all public servants will be under it, because at the end of the day, that would upset the constitutional balance.